And so the Om is the story of going from that forgotten, non-existent, transcendent essence that is the source of sound itself, of the vibrations that produce the field of Brahman that congeals into the cosmos and becomes the ooh of experience, of joy and pain and the roller coaster of every life, and then finally returning to the ocean of consciousness. At last. And so the Om is the whole journey through the cycle of time, with all of its vicissitudes built into the sound waves themselves. If you listen to the Om that is constantly sounding in the total silence of your essential being. Now, we also spoke about the turning of the wheel of Dharma among the Buddhists, as various sages at different moments in time refined the theory of reality that this movement, this school of consciousness that had broken up, of course, into many sub-schools, but the continual refinement has produced within the morphogenic field a certain capacity to perceive that was not there prior to the downloading of those insights. One of the most important downloads, in this humble opinion, is that of a great sage in Tibet who lived in the town of Dolpo and therefore is known as Dolpopa. And what he realized in his deep meditations is that most Buddhists don't understand the concept of emptiness because they apply it to the world as being empty of reality, and they focus on its being an unreal illusion, be detached from it. There is no self, there is no essence, there is no swabhava. But he is saying that Dolpopa teaches that that emptiness is the effect of the lack of another kind of emptiness that's much more primary. And this was the brilliant insight that was basically declared heretical by the Buddhist establishment in Lhasa, and he had to flee to the mountains, and so his teaching became known as the mountain doctrine. But later it caught on, and it took on various names like Shentong, and then it was systematized by one of his disciples, Taranatha, and was called the approach of other emptiness. It's another emptiness than the one you think that you are immersed in, subject to. And what does it mean? Literally, the name of this state of realization is emptiness of the other. Emptiness of otherness. Now, why is that important? What Dolpopa realized is that our consciousness, once it enters into the world and becomes a fetus within the body of a mother, becomes indebted to that mother for life. Literally, for its life. And so an infinite debt is created. This is worse than the compound interest by the banksters. And that debt then gets increased by a further debt to the father and to the family and the culture, etc. So it becomes an infinity of debts and the bondage to repaying those debts. And the anger at having to repay those debts, the fury. And so the consciousness of the ego, because it was originally totally dependent on the mother, completely in a state of need, abject neediness, which we're all free of now, of course. But imagine as an infant. And then the need turning to demand for the breast, demand for the cookie and the cookie jar, demand for the mother to be your slave. You're in bondage to her? Oh no, she's in bondage to me. But that turning of the tables simply increases the bondage, because the demand will not be met except with disappointment, followed by a weaning in which one is thrown out of the motherly arms into the much more difficult and combative arms of the father, and then sent out into a cold, cruel world of others, and one becomes in bondage to teachers and coaches and therapists and body workers, and you name it, the bondage increases constantly to the other. But the real problem is that that original other was internalized. And so the bondage becomes an internal psychological bondage to a superego. In fact, a set of superegos with their demands and their severe condemnations and disapprovals and judgments on you that keep you in a state of relational anxiety. And that relational anxiety is then projected on the world, because when you acquire language, remember, it's your mother tongue we're talking about. You acquire it from your mother, and you acquire another debt for language itself. And then that language is used to control you, to submit you to a system of education in which you will be put into a ridiculous unreality tunnel in which you have to acquiesce and accommodate to the absurd demands of a social order that does not have your best interests at heart, but uses you as a pawn and a cog in the wheel of a much larger machinery in which you have no voice. And so this bondage to the other, that on the one hand remains need at the most primitive level, and demand and hatred and fury for needing, and opposition and rejection in order to try to exist separately from the mother. But although you may have bodily separated from her, she remains the source of your heart's sense of whatever security you have at the level of the ego. And if that was not bolstered by her love of a father and a father's love for her, there was no security within the state of the world, of your Umwelt, of your environment in which you are born. And there is a total terror of change in which that comfort zone will be destroyed by the couple's love coming apart and separating, or becoming a war of intensive conflict in which you are stuck in the middle. Or else, even worse, the father leaves, and now you are stuck not only with desire for the mother, but because there's no father to identify with, you identify with her as well. And for a male, for a son, this has some catastrophic impacts, not only on one's sexuation and gender identity and security, but even on one's psychological stability itself. And there is always a terror of a malignant depersonalization through the hatred of that bondage that is so totalitarian that there can be no individuation from it. And it is this kind of a savage bondage that the postmodern ego is trapped in. And it cannot grow up. It can never leave that internal dependency, the hostile dependency of that psychological consciousness that has never been freed from bondage to the other by the realization of its unborn nature. And so what Del Popa realized is we must return to that space of consciousness that was never born, that has no debt to any other, and that is not psychologically entrained and enchained to a particular paradigm of reality, which leads to its own self-sabotage and destruction because of not having the power to extract its consciousness from the confines of that context of superego dependency projected as rivalry and envy upon others in the external space, and therefore living in a hell realm of suffering and conflict. And it's this deformed relational ontology that has destroyed the equilibrium and the capacity of the soul to open its heart to unconditional love, or even conditional love. And that has caused its intelligence to contract because of having to repress most of the iceberg of its suffering because it's too unbearable to feel and to know. And thus one develops those infamous personality strategies, which are ways of running away from yourself and your pain, whether into Kalihood or Vulcanhood or Wackohood or the people-pleasing hood. It doesn't matter. You'll use any one you need and prostitute yourself to any situation in which you have to appease the other. And it's freedom from that bondage that Dolpopa said was essential for psychological dignity, let alone Buddhahood. And now we are in the extreme dire straits of a situation where the capacity to think has vanished, has been annihilated by the system. Neither the ability to love nor to think remains to us. We are bankrupt because that was our only capital. And it's gone. Who stole it from you? And how do you get it back? Because that blissful light that you want to break through to but can't reach is your own light, but it's in hock to the other. And until you realize the light is yours, but it's all that is yours. And you have to let go of everything you think you have here, which is all mortgaged to the hilt, and reclaim the only thing you really have, which is your freedom to not have or want anything, not even life in a body. That's the meaning of all of these sages on the wall. They were free. They didn't need anything. Ramana said, I don't even need clothes. I don't want anything from you. None of them. They all got free of bondage to the other. That's why they are renowned and remembered. But the freedom from that bondage cannot come from rejection of the other, can only come from the realization that there is no other, and that these are only manifestations of your own alienated aspects of selfhood that appear as others, either in conflict with you or indifferent to you or rivalrous with you or emulating you and stuck to you and wanting to smother you. However that relational disfigurement works, it simply manifests as bondage. And so we have mistaken attachment for love. And until we purify that capacity to see the self in the other, our love cannot return, because it is not safe to give it to another. That's what we learn through all of our experience. The only safety is in the love of yourself. But your infinite, eternal, deathless self that appears as the many, as the beauty of the world, as the dream of your own imagination coming to grips with your onlyness, because there is no other. And accepting that and completely cutting off any relation to relationality, relation to need, desire, yearning, longing, belonging. Only by that does the glory of your God self emerge as the truth of your consciousness and the power of freedom that then can bestow the gift of that grace of freedom from all bondage to everyone in every relationship, that drops its conditionings and becomes its unconditional love and total compassionate wisdom and care, in which our world as self can again flourish. Because this one is dying from a lack of love and a lack of intelligence and a lack of care, which leads to a lack of desire to live, which causes the world to appear like it's empty of essence, which it is because we emptied it ourselves. And now is the time of return to the self, which alone can fill its world with the glory, the majesty, the beauty, the goodness, the purity of the presence of God, awakening and shining in every being. May you take the opportunity of this priceless moment in time before the Omega point to fill yourself with that supreme, absolute presence that can only fill your heart and mind when the other is absent and it has been completely emptied out of your conscious space. May the light of the one infinite self be risen. Namaste.
Namaste.
May you know that peace that comes from freedom, from bondage, from debt, from burdens carried uselessly from the past, from obsolete identifications, from carrying the introjections of the projections of others, from the stain of the wounds of trauma inflicted by others, and from the karmic self-sabotage that produces the wounds that you carry, that can never heal until you have become liberated from the crucified state of the ego, whose blood has become the vampiric energy upon which the world now runs. And may you know the far deeper peace of the silence of the consciousness that has transcended the plane of illusion, its wasteland and desert of emptiness, and has entered into the virtual garden of the beauty of the angelic lights of the world, who shine upon all of those seekers of the blessed, of the real, of the divine, of the free. And may you know the culmination of that ultimate yearning for union with the goddess and the Godhead in that absolute peace that passeth all change, that never enters into time, that never appears, and yet which all that is symbolizes, manifests, and expresses as a world coming to light. May you know that light as yourself. This completes the teachings of this retreat. May your reflections upon all of this that has been uncovered lead you to the naked awareness that is your own liberated reality. And may you choose not only to break through to the blissful light, but to shine into the world as that light that is needed in these dark times more than ever, and is the duty of yogis to provide. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.